Question for you. How will you decide at which restaurant you'll eat this weekend?
Maybe a friend's suggestion, a critic's review, or maybe your fallback favorite, which is what happens to me a lot. Before you make that choice, 9 News anchor Tanya O'Rourke joins us with what you might consider before you make your reservation. Tanya?
Now, Carol and Clyde, quite simply, health inspections. Every restaurant in our area is inspected at least twice a year. And I will tell you that nearly all pass with flying colors or correct the problems inspectors see. But what are inspectors looking for? What do those scores really mean, and which ones scored the worst?
Need to be at 135 degrees or greater.
Ted Talley's on a mission.
Here's a cold holding unit.
As the environmental health manager for the Northern Kentucky Health Department, it's his job to make sure all the food we eat at restaurants in Northern Kentucky is perfectly safe. So twice a year, he or someone from his office makes a surprise inspection.
It comes unannounced. We just kind of show up and say, hey, Ted from the health department here for your routine inspection.
In Kentucky, restaurants start the inspection with a perfect score of 100. This restaurant scored very well. For every violation, points are deducted. Some violations are more critical than others.
We want to see food being properly handled and temperatures being maintained properly. What we don't want to see is employees running around causing cross-contamination issues, not washing their hands, not holding food at proper temperature.
Just because you have a violation, it doesn't make you a dirty facility. It just means you have room for improvement.
The same types of inspections are going on each day in every county in our area, including Hamilton, where Greg Kesserman is the Assistant Health Commissioner. Ohio scores their restaurants differently, but similarly, critical violations, ones involving food handling, carry more weight than, say,
your standard hairnet as being something that people go in and they see somebody without a hairnet or a hat or hair restraint on. You know, the chances of that making somebody sick are pretty small.
Both Northern Kentucky and Hamilton County have searchable databases on their websites, so you can see which restaurants fared the best and worst. But inspectors caution before you look.
Keep in mind, too, that an inspection is just a snapshot. You know, the conditions in a restaurant are going to change hour by hour and day by day, so it's hard to say, hey, maybe they did have a bad day.
It was one of those days where it was not a great day to begin with, and then, of course, the health inspector shows up.
Susanna Wong Burgess's family owns and operates the Oriental Walk restaurants. They've been in business for 30 years and are well respected. But their Buttermilk location ended up at the bottom of Northern Kentucky's list of inspected restaurants with a sub-60 score.
The health inspector came in actually before our hours of operation. We had construction crews working in the kitchen, and they were, you know, having coffee, and there were some open containers because they were actually drinking coffee in the kitchen. Dishwashing pump was scheduled to be repaired that day, so that wasn't working quite up to par. And then one of our reach-in coolers, the Freon was low, so that wasn't you know, working quite properly.
Susanna says while the inspector originally gave them a 59 that day, before he left, they were already making improvements and had improved their score.
Within the hour, we were back up to an 82, so most things were already remedied.
But the district's website still shows that first score, not the 82. Ted Talley says while that first score is important, pay as much attention to the follow-up score. A follow-up is done within a week or so. It bumped Oriental Walk's score up to a very good 90.
What that does is really kind of shows us their willingness and the effort they're making to make those improvements.
In fact, the other 2 restaurants on Northern Kentucky's bottom of the list, Miyako Sushi and Steakhouse and Europa Bistro and Cafe, both originally scored in the 60s and have excellent follow-up scores in the 90s. And inspectors admit full-service big menu restaurants have a greater chance of having violations.
It's absolutely true. There's a higher probability of things to go wrong, so the chance that they have a violation has increased.
Hamilton County compiled a list for us, looking back at restaurants with the most violations over a 2-year period. The list shows Homer's Smorgasbord in Evendale had the most violations. And despite multiple calls to the restaurant, no one called us back. China City Buffet in Green Township and Brian's Fish and Chicken in Springfield Township had the 2nd and 3rd most violations. But plenty of restaurants you might recognize and be surprised by are there as well. Does it mean you shouldn't eat there? Greg Kesserman says be aware, but should people go out and eat?
Absolutely. Just like speeding, you should never speed. But it does happen occasionally. And that doesn't mean you're a bad driver necessarily, but it means you have room to improve. And the same here with our restaurants. You know, they should never have a violation, but things happen.
Some of the restaurants we mentioned did respond to our calls. Their statements are on our website. Susanna Wong-Burgess is quick to point out that their Taylor Mill location scored an awesome 99. The city of Cincinnati and Dearborn County have searchable databases as well. And we have not forgotten about those of you in Butler, Warren, and Claremont counties. None of those counties have searchable databases as of yet. Claremont County is in the beginning stages of creating one. They hope it's operational within a year. Butler and Warren counties are waiting for a statewide database to come. Links to some of the sites we discussed are on our websites, as well as documentation is there as well at WCPO.com and